Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your popper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Gonzalez. How's it going, Adrian?
Oh, good.
Okay.
Blah, 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 punchline.
So, neither of us, I didn't go to F&M. I think you said you didn't either, but we do have magic to report.
All power to the construction of my home. It's really almost done. I think I'll just miss one more week, and then hopefully that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully. We're both part of Aaron Kane's player run event, the Popper Palooza, which is a 32-person single elimination event where
we have to win our next round.
We do. A couple of content creators were in it, and the prizes are top 8 get a specific box that Aaron Kane designed, and then the winner of the whole hullabaloo gets a custom design box top to bottom. Again, like, Aaron has been a huge supporter of Popper as a format. He's a really cool dude. He's one of the first people who followed us on Twitter. And if you really, really need a custom box,
and you do.
Yeah. To be fair, I didn't think I did, but now that I've held one in my hands, I'm kind of considering getting one because I'm working on building Legacy, so I might want to get a fancy deck box. But
Mike and I both won our first round. We were both playing Kuldotha Boros, and I played against Blue Black Delver. And Mike, I believe you played against Teachings. Is that correct?
Yes. You managed to get yours recorded. I, however, am a Dirty Mac user, and as a result, have to emulate. I have to emulate Windows within Macintosh, within Mac OS, in order to get it to work. So it's It was not getting recorded. I'm looking for ways to figure this out. But yeah, I played against Teachings.
I've received positive feedback about my final play of the second game where I galvanic blasted my own bird token to prevent it from all my birds from being killed. But I actually think I could have just galvanic blasted Cedric and still won the game. So I think I got a little too tricky, honestly.
I mean, if you get there, you get there. I definitely at one point in the game I had a fast opener involving a Kuldotha Rebirth, and I actually wound up burning a bolt to draw out a counterspell so that they could resolve their Echoing Decay, I believe it was. Yeah.
I'm gonna switch it up for next week. Can't record a video and then just play the same deck. It'd be idiotic.
I haven't decided yet, but it felt good to win my first match of Popper in, I don't know, about 2 months or so. Just felt good to know that I still have it. Also, I have not gotten as many hours as you have with the Kuldotha Boros list. Oh man, that deck is really, really powerful.
Yeah, it's a good deck.
Yeah, it like the guy I played against, who I can only remember the username Wolby, did a really solid job of piloting Teachings, but at the end, I was just pumping out threats more efficiently, and I don't think that they ever saw a copy of Evenkar's Justice, or at least they didn't play it. I don't know if they're even running it, but I don't know.
It's Teachings. You gotta assume, right?
Well, they did have a handful of anglers and other threats, so
Oh, maybe not. Yeah.
I was gonna say I was there was a moment there where I'm like, I keep playing around Justice. Should I still play around Justice? I'm not sure if they actually have it because they're playing real win cons. But I've got my match for the second round later today, probably pretty much after we finish recording this episode. And I also haven't made up my mind as to what I'm playing this week, so we'll see. Anything else you want to mention about Popper Palooza?
It's cool. And I don't know what my next match is. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about it next week.
Yeah, hopefully as long as we can stay in this tournament, we can keep talking about matches, but and hopefully I'm going to try to see if I can get some sort of recording setup. Just emulating Windows and then trying to, record on top of that is kind of a pain.
Yeah.
But this week we're talking about red cards and pretty much nothing else.
Blue is for people who like to do things, and red is for those who do them.
I
I don't know.
mean,
There was something there.
you say that, but would you qualify the deck we're about to talk about as dreadfully interactive?
No. But why would you?
Yeah, that's.
Ego Huffer, Beagle Face.
I don't get the Hearthstone memes, man. I don't get them. Someone please.
You need to Google Migo Face after this episode.
All right, I will try and understand other card games, but this week we're talking about Burn, and specifically we're talking about the list that Mike Wallio piloted to first place at the Rags to Riches 9, I think it was this past week.
Yes, it was, and I will preface our discussion today by saying that I think this is my ideal version of a Burn deck. I don't play Burn a lot, but I have opinions about how Burn should be constructed. And I think Michael really hit the nail on the head with his deck here, which is why I'm pleased that we're covering it today.
Yeah, actually, kind of by pure happenstance, it was just the most recent result that MTG Goldfish had hanging around. But let's get into it. So this list has a scant 4 creatures. All of them are Thermo Alchemist, which is 1 in a red for a 0/3 defender. It taps to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and every time you cast a instant or sorcery, you untap Thermo Alchemist.
And this card is the real deal. Unfortunately, it does leave you open to creature removal, but you don't. That doesn't really matter because when Thermo Alchemist stays alive, most games you will easily get at least a lightning bolt worth of damage off of him.
Yeah, and now's as good a time as any to talk about it. Burn is always going to be about efficiency, right? Like you want your ratio of mana spent to damage dealt to be as high as damage dealt. Yeah, you want ideally equal to or better than the lightning bolt range.
Right, and I think this is from an older article, I believe. I think it's from one of the first. I think it might be from Who's the Beatdown. Actually, now that I think about it. Which is a classic article. If you've never read Who's the Beatdown, you should 100% read it. It's one of the best Magic articles ever written. And I think it's in that article that they mentioned that it's called the shock test. You want your burn spells on average to do between 2 and like 2.5 damage per spell in order to kill your opponent. And Pauper's a little harder because of the gain lands, unfortunately. But that's sort of the ratio you should be aiming for.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we've got access to Lightning Bolt and, Chain Lightning, both of which are in here as play sets. Lightning Bolt is red instant, deal 3 damage to a creature or player, and Chain Lightning is sorcery for a red, deal 3 damage to a creature or player. That player or that creature's controller may pay red to make a copy of Chain Lightning, which, have you ever seen this text matter?
Yes, I have actually killed a burn opponent with this.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, not like immediately, like he didn't die immediately, but I got to do it when he was at like 6 life, and then I Galvanic Blasted in the next turn.
Wow. How good did that feel? Scale 1 to 10?
11.
That's fair.
Little taste of your medicine there, Mr. Burn player. People get really frustrated playing against Burn because they kill you so quickly, and the games are very non-interactive, and it's just like if they have a good hand, you almost can't beat it. But
yeah, we've also got 4 copies Lava Spike, which is a bolt that only targets a player at sorcery speed. And
so,
the last,
sorry, go ahead.
The last 1 drop we've got here is 4 copies of Needle Drop, which is a point of contention among players. Needle Drop is 1 red instant, deal 1 damage to target creature or player that was already dealt damage this turn, draw a card.
And that's why it's relevant, is because it lets you keep chaining together the burn spells. So, we have 12 3 damage, 1 mana burn spells, and which ideally are all going upstairs. That's why Lava Spike is so good, is because it doesn't really matter, because if you're killing your opponent's creatures with your burn spells, you're fighting a losing battle. And then Needle Drop lets you combo with an enchantment we'll talk about later to draw a card on your opponent's turn, or to chain 2 burn spells together to find a 3rd burn spell. So it's really not a bad card because it replaces itself.
Yeah. Next we got 3 copies of Flame Rift, which is 1 red for a sorcery, deal 4 damage to each player.
And so many people do not run this card because, as you can see, we'll get this a little later. It is $22 for those 3 copies online. So I'm just going to open the link in a new tab because I'm bad at math. It's a $7.44 card on Moto. It's 48 cents in real life, and that's because it's from Nemesis, which is a criminally underdrafted set on Moto. By that I mean because it also has days in it.
I was gonna say, is it really criminally underdrafted if it's a terrible draft format?
I just mean because there's these cards that are good but are extremely expensive because of the just because of the availability of them. However, I will say this deck is only about $30 in real life, or excuse me, online. So, and most of those are these Flame Rifts, which, like I said, I see people not run for budget reasons, but I think that Flame Rift absolutely makes the deck better.
Yeah, and again, as with a lot of these very aggressive decks, the 4 damage to you isn't always super relevant, but 4 damage for 2 mana is.
Well, let's compare it to our next card, which is Lightning Strike, 1 in a red for 3 damage to target creature or player. This is just a not as good Bolt, but it's also a not as good Flame Rift.
Yeah, contextually, if you really do need to remove a creature in order to have a path to victory, it can be relevant. Worth noting, I did see an interview actually with Michael Wallio at Rags to Riches because I caught some of the tournament. And he full well admits that he completely blanked on the fact that this is a strictly worse Incinerate. Incinerate
Lightning Strike, you mean?
Yeah. Lightning Strike is 3 damage to a creature or player at instant speed for 1 in red. Incinerate is the exact same thing, except it says creature dealt damage this way cannot be regenerated this turn.
Right. We discussed this a little before the show. That will almost never come up because, like I said, if you're aiming these at your opponent's creatures, you're not in a good spot. That is shorn up a little by the next card, which is Searing Blaze. RR deals 1 damage to target player and 1 damage to target creature that player controls, or landfall. If you had a land into the battlefield under your control this turn, it does 3 damage to both of those instead. I will say that removing the creature does not mean that the opponent will not take damage.
So like you do have to have the creature there to begin with, which is one of the things that I've definitely seen players in person goof up on and go like, all right, Searing Blaze you, and it's like, no, gotta have both targets. But yeah, if you remove one of the targets, the other one still will resolve.
One of them is a player, though.
Yeah, one of them is a player. So I guess technically, if you kill the player, the other half is not going to try and resolve anyway. Then we've got 4 copies of Riftbolt, which is 2 in a red for a sorcery, deal 3 damage to a creature or player. But the key part is it has suspend. So you pay a red, you put 1 time counter on it in exile, and then at the beginning of your next upkeep, you remove a counter and you may cast the spell. This is a bolt on layaway, right?
Right. Yeah. Functionally, it's a 1-drop spell. You just get it a turn later, or you can get it now for 3 mana.
Yeah. And this is, pretty good on turn 1 because, if your opponent has if your opponent's on the play and they have a Spell Stutter Sprite, it's still not going to catch this.
Exactly.
Rounding out the list is 4 of probably the most powerful and arguably the most feel-bad card in this deck, Fire Blast. It technically costs 4 red for an instant, deal 4 damage to target creature or player, but I don't think I have ever seen this spell hard cast. Fire Blast has an alternate casting cost of sacrificing 2 mountains.
Right, so if you have 2 mountains, you can go bolt, Fire Blast, and that's 10 damage.
Yeah. That is most often the way that this sees play. I don't think I've ever seen anyone in any format, for that matter, hard casting Fire Blast. I'm sure it has happened, but that's not the situation you want to be in.
6 mana is a big chunk of change in this deck, as we'll see as we go on further down the list.
Then rounding out the non-lands is 4 copies of Curse of the Pierced Heart, 1 in a red for an enchantment curse or aura curse, right? And it enchants a player, and at the beginning of that player's upkeep, Curse of the Pierced Heart deals 1 damage to them.
So this functions sort of like Thermo Alchemist. It's always going to be a big part of this deck because it turns on your needle drops. But realistically, this card will, if you play this card on turn 2 and your opponent is playing like Stompy, this card could easily win you the game.
Yeah, it's generally hard to remove. Black decks and blue decks unless blue decks unless they counter it, and black decks unless actually black has stone no way to interact with this, doesn't it?
Correct. Black and red do not have ways to deal with enchantments traditionally.
Yeah, and other red decks just can't deal with this. It does get eaten by Pyroblast. That's like the one exception in the Grixis shard that actually is really good for dealing with this. But this is kind of, I think the best way to think about it is it's a 1/1 unblockable creature that can't be removed with creature removal.
Right.
And then we've just got 18 mountains rounding out the main board.
We'll get into some of the flex slots later. Some people play Forgotten Cave. Some people don't think that's right. We'll get into that.
But yeah, moving into the sideboard, 3 copies of Electrickery, one of our sweeper effects, 3 copies of Pyroblast, 2 copies of Relic of Progenitus, 2 copies of Flaring Pain, 3 copies of Smash to Smithereens, and 2 copies of Molten Rain.
Let's hit on Flaring Pain real fast. It's an instant 1 on a red. Damage can't be prevented this turn. Flashback R. It's there to get around Circle of Protection red. It's essentially the only Skullcrack effect we have in the format.
Yeah, and it doesn't have damage attached to it, so it doesn't feel as good as Skullcrack would. But
it also doesn't prevent life gain, unfortunately. But
yeah, this is definitely I can see this if you're kind of having the Storm-esque turn with Thermo Alchemist, and you really want to be able to make sure you get enough damage in there. Just it seems like kind of a niche card. The 2 copies is probably a concession to the fact that there are 4 cards in this deck that draw a card, and they are conditional at that. So,
yeah,
Burn is very much one of those decks where you play with the top half of your deck, if that. In terms of cost, we've got this list right here. Online is $28, and in paper is $64. And as you pointed out, most of that online cost is entirely Flame Rift.
Yeah, and if you don't want to play Flame Rift, I mean, you don't have to, but it does make the deck a lot better. Without the Flame Rift, so you're looking at $6, and you play Keldon Marauders instead or something.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those decks that can be ultra budget online. In paper, you're kind of straddled with the fact that all of these spells are pretty much playable in other forms of burn decks, like Lightning Bolt is played in burn decks across all non-standard formats. Chain Lightning is a staple in burn and Legacy.
Lava Spike.
Yeah, every part of this is expensive somewhere else.
I think that this might be the popper deck that is most like the decks in other formats. Really, what it loses is the color diversity of modern, because you can't play cards like Atarka's Command or Lightning Helix. And then from Legacy, it loses something like Price of Progress, which I'm not sure how much that would matter in Pauper anyway, even if you could play it.
There are definitely some decks that would not be able to survive a resolved Price of Progress. I would argue one of the bigger things that this deck loses from other formats is the lack of efficient haste 1-drops. We're missing also Goblin Guide and Monastery Swiftspear from both the Modern and Legacy versions.
And Eidolon of the Great Revel.
Yeah, that would be real strong in a format with lots of 1-drops, which is why it sees a lot of play in Modern. Just trying to think this through, because in Modern it's generally Naya colors, right? So that you can
you can play Lightning Helix or Atarka's Command. Yeah, some people play Wild Nacatl.
Okay, yeah. I'm not the biggest Modern buff, so my knowledge is rusty at best.
It's a format people play. I'll say that.
And for a discussion today, we're kind of going to delve into some of the options that Burn has.
Right. For a monocolored deck that is interested in dealing as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible, it has a surprising amount of flex slots.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some cards that either have been run or could be run that kind of fit into the theme. First off, you mentioned Forgotten Cave. Forgotten Cave is a land, taps for red, and it also has cycling for a red. This card I don't think is good.
No, People play it because it'll draw them an extra card, but it comes into play tapped. Huge downside, and cannot be sacrificed to Fire Blast. Another huge downside. So yeah, like people play it to draw cards, but I like what Michael's done here. He's just playing 2 more mountains. I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's generally one of the things that I see in the online results that differs from list to list. And I'm sure when you draw Forgotten Cave like turn 3 or 4, and you really just want to draw into more gas, it feels great. But the one lander with just Forgotten Cave that's got to be close to unplayable.
Yeah, it's not great. And of course, this deck mulligans poorly. It has hardly any card draw outside of those or outside of the needle drops. And then, you're down a whole card, and that's huge in a deck that needs to build a critical mass of burn spells.
Well, how about another draw card? How about Insolent Neonate? Insolent Neonate is a 1/1 for a red. It has menace, so it can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, and it has the ability sacrifice Insolent Neonate, discard a card, draw a card.
I like that card a lot better, to be honest with you. I just like looking over Michael's list here. The only thing I could think of cutting might be might be like a 1 of Lightning Strike, because the rest of his cards are very good. And I think that if you weren't running the Flame Rifts, you might have a bit more room for a creature like that, or like Keldon Marauders, which we can discuss in just a second. But it does get in for damage. I have seen an argument online that you could run it over Thermo Alchemist. Because over the course of the game, they'll probably deal about as much damage as each other. Plus, the Insolent Neonate has the bonus of being able to get sacrificed. So yeah, it's a good card. You would just have to cut something else that's good to play it.
Yeah, and that is always with a lot of the tiered lists that we talk about. There's always the catch of like, well, you could play this, but the rest of the deck's really solid already. So
yeah, it might just come down to personal preference, whether or not you think Thermo Alchemist or Insolent Neonate are better, or if you just don't have the money for Flame Rifts, that's totally a thing.
Yeah. Next on the list, let's talk about Keldon Marauders. Keldon Marauders is 1 in a red for a 3/3 with Vanishing 1, I believe it is. Yeah. No, Vanishing 2. Because Vanishing needs to have a counter on it at the beginning of upkeep. Yeah. When it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, you deal 1 damage to target player. And this is basically like ideally as a 2-mana lava axe.
Right, because at its worst, it's a shock. At its best, it's a lava axe. The problem with the card is that it has a lot of variance attached to it because of that. However, it is only 20 cents for a playset on Moto. So if you are, if you're a little bit more budget and you need to be a little bit more budget conscientious, you can absolutely run this over some of the more expensive cards and be just fine because it is still a great card.
Yeah, like the other thing is, even when it's not dealing 5 to your opponent's face, it's probably eating a creature or it's eating a removal spell. And hoo boy, it feels bad to use removal on this thing.
Right, because you just get hit for the damage anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, trading a removal spell against a deck that does not run a lot of creatures to save yourself 3 damage is not the end of the world. Let me hit you with this. Would you feel better about Keldon Marauders if it had Vanishing 1 but had haste?
Absolutely. That card would be insane.
Just to really maximize the gotta go fast aspect of it?
Yeah, dude, absolutely. That would be better. That would be maybe even a little too good, honestly, for a common. Haste, 3.
Yeah.
That would be pretty good.
Not to put out too many opinions there, but we did just get another free creature, so I'm just saying common ain't what it used to be.
You would play that with this card if you could. You could play that in a red-green deck.
So actually, let me touch upon that. Do you think Burning Tree Emissary has a place in Burn?
No.
Okay.
I think Burn should run less creatures, and I mean I guess it'd be cool to go Burning Tree, Curse of the Pierce Tarp, but again, what do you cut? Does Burning Tree maximize your damage? I guess if Burning Tree lives for 2 turns, it's better than a Lightning Bolt. But if it dies immediately, then it was kind of whatever.
Yeah.
I'm more of the opinion that Burn should run less creatures, honestly.
Okay, so you're more in favor of, blanking some portion of your opponent's deck game 1 in order to gain a little bit of advantage so that game 2 you can just kind of do your thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that having consistent damage sources is good, but we don't have something like Eidolon, the Great Revel, or Goblin Guide, or any of those creatures that are extremely good if they manage to connect. Like a turn 1 Goblin Guide is just 2 free damage. If it lives another turn, that's 4 damage. Eidolon of the Great Revel, you got to play it, and then they got to get rid of it. And it's 2 damage every time they cast a spell and don't. So these are really efficient threats that hang around for a long time, and I just don't think Burn and Pauper has access to those same levels of threats outside of cards like Thermo Alchemist.
Okay, that's fair. I can see why. I can see why you would hold that opinion. What about what about some sort of red green, hybrid between this and Stompy? Like, yes, our mana is not as good in this format, but some sort of deck where you're playing Burning Tree into Rancor and Bolt.
This is not bad.
Okay.
I like it. Like maybe a green deck that splashes red for some burn. That seems okay.
Yeah. Also, while we're on the topic of new cards, this one is a little contentious. Thunderous Wrath. So Thunderous Wrath is 4 red for an instant, deal 5 damage to target creature or player, but it also has Miracle for a red. So if this is the first card you have drawn this turn, you can cast it for its miracle cost. So if you can make this the first card you draw, it becomes a much better lightning bolt. And if it isn't, it's the worst card in your deck.
Yeah, and people have said to us that they don't think it's very good because red, has to can't really manipulate its library, and you're very dependent on your draws. But really, as long as this card isn't in your opening hand, it's a good draw. If you play 2 in the deck, it's fine. And if you end of turn bolt, needle drop, Thunderous Wrath your opponent, of course you have to do it in the dark, but it is still pretty freaking cool. That might also bump up Forgotten Cave. You could cycle into turn into a Thunderous Wrath. That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, that is true. So I'm looking at this, and there's I just I'm a big fan of using hypergeometric calculators, which if you don't know what they are, definitely worth learning how to use them. They're a very quick way to be able to calculate complex probabilities of things. The odds of having one or more copy of Thunderous Wrath in your opener is about 10%. So if you're running 2 of them, and I feel like if you're not running 2 of them, you're not going to see them enough for it to matter. So, is 1 out of every 10 games functionally having a mulligan out of the gate worth it?
I don't know. Maybe.
Well,
probably.
I mean, imagine you're sitting down with Burn, and I tell you, you get to play Thunderous Wrath, but 1 out of every 10 games, you're just gonna start with 6 cards in your hand.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, over the course of
I think it's fine.
Over the course of a league, like, you're gonna see that at least once on average, right? Even if you go 2-0 in all your matches, that's by probabilities, you're gonna see it at least once in your opener. So
maybe it's not that good then.
Yeah, I think there's a very high upside on it. And
what about as a one of?
As a one of, you're. Well, let's just see. So one population size 60, 1 success in the population, and 7 cards in your opener. It works out to about 1% of the time it'll be in your opener.
All right. Well, that doesn't seem so bad.
Though that doesn't seem right to me. Maybe I'm misusing. Oh, no. Sorry. Cumulative probability. X is greater than 1. Sorry, it's about 8%. So it's not dropping it a whole lot. And, you're still running that risk of sometimes you're just going to have that brick in your hand, right? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this. The other thing we got downshifted in Modern Masters is Magma Jet. And here's another one of those inefficient ones with upside. One in a red, instant, deal 2 damage to target creature or player. Scry 2.
What's so funny is this is also much better with Thunderous Wrath.
Well, there's the thing, is there a version of Burn that's a little bit more controlly and maybe splashes a color that can really, really maximize its use of these 2 cards? Where, maybe you're a blue-red control deck that, is playing Burn as its win con, but has top of library manipulation so that Thunderous Wrath is live more of the time.
Possible. Also, I like Magma Jet in decks other than Burn. I don't think it's an auto include in Burn. Scrying is fine. If you turn 2 Magma Jet, scry 2 Lance at the bottom, obviously that's awesome. But I don't know if 2 damage is really enough to cut it in this deck. But time will tell.
Well, let me hit you with this. If the average card in your deck is, let's say, worth 2.5 damage, counting up for land, and also your the average card in your deck is 2.5 damage. Let's compare this to Needle Drop. Is the Scry 2 better than Draw a Card?
Maybe. I don't know. I would say so, just on the face of it, because draw land, you would rather have scry that away.
Well, let's just say, on average, like again, we're working with probability here. 2.5 damage for the average card in your deck versus like being able to scry and ensure that if there's 2 land on top of your deck, they're gone.
I think I'd rather scry.
You think you'd rather scry?
Yeah.
Man, my big thing here is just the fact that, digging 1 card deeper always seems good to me. Like I have a very hard time resisting the words draw a card on anything, even when it's, a suboptimal burn spell. I will say one thing Needle Drop does have going against it is the fact that you need to have already dealt damage to the player.
Right. So it has to be comboed with another card.
Yeah. Now we do have a couple of recursive sources of damage that can trigger on our opponent's turn, in the form of Thermo Alchemist and Curse of the Pierced Heart. So it's not an impossibility, but it does certainly make it a little bit harder. And I don't know, for me, that downside to Needle Drop has always been there, and I don't think that Magma Jet actually fixes it, but I don't know. Maybe someone out there who has a far better grasp of statistical distributions than I do can do the math on this and tell us, which one of these is actually better from a statistics point of view. I have a feeling it's Needle Drop, but that's just, gut feeling for me.
What about Gut Shot?
What about Gut Shot?
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Free. No, that's not good. Don't play it.
Well, actually, what about one of the weirder bolt variants? Shard Volley. Shard Volley is red, instant. As an additional cost to play it, sack a land, deals 3 damage to a creature or player.
That card is good. Its problem is that it competes with Fire Blast. So maybe if you cut 2 Fire Blasts, you could play 2 Shard Volleys instead. I actually really don't mind that card.
Well, my only kind of criticism of it is like, in a 1-lander, that's a dead card. Whereas like Fire Blast, you're rarely like Fire Blasting out of like, oh man, I've got to snap this off turn 2. It's mostly just, okay, I've got a Fire Blast. That means I only have to get my opponent down to 4, and then I have a free win.
Well, let's talk about Thunderclap. Do you know Thunderclap? Oh no, it's only to creatures. Never mind. Let's not talk about Thunderclap.
Out of curiosity, what does Thunderclap do? All the burn spells named after lightning and fire blur together after a while.
Thunderclap is an instant for 2 in a red. You may sacrifice a mountain instead of paying Thunderclap's mana cost. Thunderclap deals 3 damage to target creature. So I misread that when I was reading it.
Okay. If we had a version of that was actually a bolt, I would say that's super playable.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Like even at 2 mana, if you had a bolt where you could sack a land instead, heck yes, like that's instant upgrade right there.
Right.
Because name of the game is trying to get your opponent to 0 as quickly as possible in intervals of 3. So actually, there's another topic related to burn. If most of our stuff is 3 damage, it takes on average 7 spells to kill the opponent.
Right.
So anytime that we have the opportunity to cut that number down is good. Like if you could just guarantee that you rip 4 Thunderous Wrath your first 4 turns, your opponent's dead turn 4. But that's not obviously realistic. So so wait, if we're going by 3s, 15. Yeah, the big issue is you can get to 18 in multiples of 3, and then Bolt finishes it. But the big thing is going from like the 5 damage thing, which is again part of the reason I like Thunderous Wrath, is the fact that 5 bolts on a Thunderous Wrath is 20. The big question is how much life is your opponent really starting with in most decks? Because gain lands are just kind of omnipresent right now. I don't know. Any thoughts on that matter?
Okay, so the problem with gain land adds a whole other turn. If your opponent has 2 or 3 gain lands, you just wasted a spell. So that's, I think, the real thing keeping burn from being a super top contender in our format. Props to Michael for being able to pull off winning a big tournament. But I just, there's a reason it's not a very high deck in the meta.
And let me hit you with this. A lot of people have speculated that come the release of Modern Masters 3, that we'll see a notable shift to a more aggressive meta where the tap lands are not as great, and you're going to start seeing more monocolored decks. Do you think Burn stock goes up?
Yeah, I think Burn could be a lot better in that case. Yeah, I think Burn would be a lot better.
Yeah, I'm just thinking,
because it wouldn't have to contend with all this incidental life gain.
Yeah, because I mean, even if you're on the bolts. The bolts analysis here. Even if you just hit bolts every turn, 2 gain lands is enough to up the number needed from 7 to 8. And, that incidental life gain does actually matter in some cases. So I definitely think that, if we do see that predicted shift to a more aggressive format, I think Burn has a much better time when your opponent isn't incidentally undoing your game plan through no fault of their own.
Right.
And obviously, we see sideboard cards all the time for Burn. Like, no one actually wants to play Lone Missionary most of the time. It's just kind of, this undoes a turn worth of Burn, so sure.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of people who play Radiant Fountain, especially decks with Karoo style lands. So those are a huge pain in the neck for Burn.
Yeah, there's definitely, those style of deck I could definitely see going down in terms of popularity. And then it just kind of comes down to who has better sideboard cards. Because, for example, like in green, in Stompy, and I guess really just Stompy. I guess elves could play it if they wanted to, but they have Well-Wisher. There's what do you call it? Feed the Clan, which is actually a really, really powerful life gain spell.
Yeah, that card is incredible against Burn. 10 life. Yeah.
10 life for 2 mana at instant speed is just, that's a lot.
It's tough. It's tough for Burn to beat.
Yeah, and I mean it with Stompy, if they're going to be running a whole lot of 2-power free bears, Rancor enables that very nicely.
Yes. Sorry, I was just stretching.
That's all right. But yeah, Burn is one of those decks that is always kind of present in the format. It used to be the most expensive like tier 1 deck in the format in paper, just because there was a time where Chain Lightnings were, I think, $15 a piece.
Yeah, they were extremely expensive. That was before they got reprinted in Eternal Masters.
Yeah, and I think that might have even been one of the called shots we had on the show about that set before it released. Just going, oh yeah, maybe they'll reprint Chain Lightning. But
they did.
I don't know. Burn is definitely one of those decks that I've never had the impetus to pick up, but in the coming months I might.
It's just not that. I don't think it's that fun.
Yeah, it's one of those decks that kind of, I played with Stompy for a while, and at the end of the day, I was like, okay, I get it. I can be successful with this. I understand everything that it's doing. I get all the parts, but like at the end of the day, there aren't that many lines, right? Like, you're trying to get in for a bunch of damage, and there's the cutesy plays with Hunger the Howl Pack and Nest Invader, or using Quirion Ranger to ramp you a little bit, that sort of stuff. But
yeah,
end of the day, Burn kind of strikes me as that same mold of deck where it's like, unlike Burn in other formats, which like I've played Legacy Burn, and that deck is super fun and actually pretty decently interactive, and has interesting matchups. But in Pauper, it's just kind of like, yep, bolt you, fire blast you. All right, are we done here? Like,
yeah, are you dead yet?
Yeah, I don't know, and that's not a criticism towards people who play this deck. It's just it's very much not my cup of tea when it comes to Magic. Yeah. So we're a little light on this episode. There hasn't been a lot of discussion in the Pauper sphere. Everyone's kind of waiting with bated breath for Modern Masters 3 to come out. There's
new toys.
Yeah, new toys. The only real notable thing I can think of is there's been a couple of blue-red Delver decks showing up in the standings. But
that deck's fun.
Have you actually put it together yet?
Yeah, I played it a little bit online. It was pretty fun.
I mean, is this the Scred one?
Yeah, it's the Scred one.
Okay, so it splashes red for Scred, and what else?
Scred and Bolt, really.
All right. That seems okay.
Yeah, it's right.
But to close this show out, because we had a very, very warm reception to last week's episode, and I thought I'd bring back a segment here that plenty of
I know what this is.
Plenty of jokes in the last episode. So Adrian, I'd like you to go and look at our show notes right now. And you'll see that I've put in 3 images here. And we're gonna play a game called
When I take this girl on a date.
Friend, Marry, Kill. Let's go with that.
Friend, Marry, Kill.
All right, this is a family show. So you expressed your opinions that Ravnica is the most attractive of the planes. So here we have Ash Zealot, who I believe is, this has to be Boros, right?
Actually, Ash, she is, but Ash Zealot's a little interesting because she clearly hoses the previous block, which was Innistrad. She's a 2/2 with first strike and haste, and has the text, whenever a player casts a spell from a graveyard, Ash Zealot deals 3 damage to that player. Can I pick now?
Hold on. We got to go through all 3. Next, we got Bane Alley Broker.
I don't even need to know who the rest are, but okay. Bane Alley Broker.
Bane Alley Broker is some sort of demure, I guess you'd call her a merchant. Brokers fall into that vague category. And then rounding it out. Yeah. She's selling illegal wares. And rounding this out, we've got in her very sort of Judge Dredd getup, the Azorius Arrestor. So there you go, buddy. Which one of these nice ladies you gonna friend, marry, and murder? I guess.
I'm gonna marry Ash Zealot. I played her in my standard deck. Killed a lot of things with her. I really like her. She's good. She's everything you could want. She's got a fiery mace. She's got cool shoulder pauldrons. She hates necromancers. It's a match made in heaven. I'm gonna friend Bane Alley Broker. I think she would be a good friend to have. She appears to be presenting the viewer with a dagger here.
Okay.
So yeah. I think I want to be her friend. And then I'll use that dagger to kill the Azorius Arrestor because rules are dumb.
All right. Well, there's our little attempt at a recurring segment, and we'll see how that one goes over. But
yeah, Ravnica, Sexiest Playing Alive.
Ravnica, Sexiest Playing Alive, 2 shows running now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No Golgari people. I'll point out.
To be fair, you are aware I put this together literally minutes before the show. The idea has been kicking around in my head all week, but I can promise you, if people don't absolutely hate this segment, I have a lot of cards from Ravnica that I need to get in this list.
We have 6 sets to choose from.
Yeah, 6 bafflingly large sets. Although I feel like I can't include Dark Confidant because that's a real human being, and I would feel weird about you being forced to critique how attractive Bob Marr is.
I'll be friends with Bob. That's cool.
All right. Well, as we said, a little bit of a short episode this week. Hopefully, more things develop as we go, and I believe we still have another week and a half until the release of Modern Masters 3, but maybe next time we'll pick a deck that doesn't win so quickly and doesn't exit an episode so quickly. But we're trying to get through all the tier 1. So Adrian,
much like Baron, this game is over. Thanks for joining us today. Check below this video or in the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that if you are listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list, an idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we're signing off for Color Commentary.